before we finish off the last two things we needed to from the first seminar, we had two more assessments to go, and before we move into the new stuff for today, just cover off a little bit of housekeeping. So the cheat sheets, the ones that you guys got before were for the presentation. Now I'm missing two key things. One is relevance, and the other one is the compared to section. So the relevance will be right at the top. You remember the movement breakdown, we have those three movement families, the squat, the deadlift, presses and pulls. If you look at that for each test, it'll tell you whether that assessment, hip scour, standing straight arm raise, is relevant to one of those movement families and why it's relevant. The other one is the compare to section. So it'll be right down the bottom. For that assessment, it'll tell you what other assessments you should be comparing it to. The idea is, with a battery of assessments where we basically test the same things in multiple ways, if you keep testing it different ways but you always get the same answer, it becomes more and more likely that what you're finding is correct. Right? Everyone's done like some sort of questionnaire, like a psych personality test or something like that, where they ask you the same question 10 different ways. That's how you find out what's true. In the cheat sheets you guys had before, we've simplified the description for assessment before, and that's on the email I sent you guys about half an hour ago. For the pro forma, which is what you fill out when you're doing your screening, the hip scour, remove the requirement to assess glute to heel distance. You literally have your hands full as it is doing the hip scour. You don't have enough hands to really do it without doing some pretty weird positions here and there. So it's too difficult to measure, and it's already covered by the quadruped rock and by the squats test, so they're still covered off on it. We've also simplified the aim. Before we're going into probably a bit too much detail about how we're assessing the relationship between the head and neck of the femur and the acetabulum to determine the shape of the hip socket and how much hip flexion they can get. Way too much information. It's really not relevant. We're assessing hip flexion. That's it. Hey, for the quadruped rock, something that Joe and I found between the last seminar and this one was when it's very small movement of the hips during the quad rock, especially if it happens very slowly, it's really difficult to discern whether that movement occurs at all. What we found was if you get a broomstick, place it along the length of the client's spine, as they start to round, you'll see light appear between the broomstick and the back, and it becomes very, very easy to tell whether they've changed from that neutral position that they started. For the arch and the hollow test, we remove the type of extension, type of flexion, which is your global and local flexion, your hinge extension, that sort of stuff. It's just too difficult for us to assess it consistently and reliably. The primary concern for those assessments is we're measuring their ability to resist light flexion and light extension of the spine. That's the key thing that we still want. For the squats test, there was a bit specific to the front squat for making sure that the forearms or the humerus stayed, the humerus stayed parallel throughout the movement. It's redundant. We don't need it. The hands are clasped around the back of the head. If the elbows drop, the head has to come with it. So you'll see the head go, you'll see the thoracic spine round, and they failed the neutral spine portion of the test. So we're already. What else we got? Sweet. Any questions on housekeeping before we go into the end of the last seminar? All good? Right. So the last two tests are for motor control. We're testing the interfaces, the shoulders and the hips. These are crucial because they're the link between the core and the extremities, and we express power from the core to the extremities through those two interfaces. What we're looking for is compensatory motor patterns. If we find one, it means less power for the client, more risk of injury. Oh, it's so hard to read.
I think everyone's got it on their phones anyway.
So this is, I'll just let you know what we're looking at. So this is an excerpt from the cheat sheet, the glute function. This part at the top is from the screening performer, the glute function. So what we're looking at is to see if the motor pattern occurs in the order it's meant to, which is, do the glutes contract before the hamstrings? It's rare that you're going to find that's actually the case. Most people, the hamstrings will contract first, then the glutes. What that compensation actually is, I've heard people talk about gluteal amnesia. I still haven't seen whether it's actually true or not. It all seems a bit iffy. Big one is arthrogenic muscle inhibition, which is definitely a thing until someone proves otherwise. Arthrogenic muscle inhibition is any, basically, at least for the glutes, any lower joint injury, spinal injury. You get a presynaptic inhibition in the brain where certain muscles will be unable to contract fully for 18 to 33 months. Okay? And the glutes are the primary muscle that turns off when those lower body joint injuries and spinal injuries occur. The compensation you'll find is that the glutes are off, the hamstrings, hip flexors, deep external rotators of the hip take over the work. They're not designed for concentric contraction of the glutes, which extends the hip, and that eccentric contraction, which sort of lowers us down to the ground. Right, so in assessing it, we're breaking the glute down into three parts. We have the upper glute, the middle glute, and the lower glute. The upper glute is primarily for movements that occur closest to full hip extension, like walking, the primary one. As you get lower in the glute, it becomes more and more important as we increase the angle of hip flexion. Okay? So what we're going to do is get the client to lie, actually can I grab you, Joe? Just get you like right up the front. Actually, just do it right there with a little bit of space. So it's going to lie prone on the ground.
Pants can come off.
What's that?
Pants.
Yeah. Prone on the ground, arms out of the way because I'm going to be kneeling along. I'm going to be kneeling along the side of his body, so I don't want his hands down by the side of his body. Before I perform the test, I'm going to explain to him what I'm going to do so he doesn't get a shock when I push my fingers into his butt cheeks. When we're going to test it in series. So what we'll do is work from the top to the middle to the bottom. And I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go. On go, keeping his legs straight, he's just going to lift it up into the air 1 or 2 inches. And when that happens, I'm trying to discern what comes on first, the glute or the hamstring. Working my way from top to bottom, both sides. If you have an instance where you can't tell which one contracts first, retest it. If you still can't tell, give them the benefit of the doubt and mark it down as the glute. Okay, now keep in mind this is the easiest position for the glutes to come on first. As you start to increase the angle of hip flexion, it gets more and more difficult. Everyone's seen butt link in a squat. You notice that it happens at a different point going down than it does when they go up. Maintaining that eccentric contraction as you increase hip flexion is much more difficult than a simple concentric contraction as they're coming up. So when they squat down, you'll see the butt link high. When they come out at the bottom, you'll see it sort itself out early. That's why you have that time difference between the two. Right, so finding the bony part of his hip, I'm just going to work down about 1 inch using the tips of my fingers. I don't want to use the length and I don't want to use the palm because I need to be able to push in enough to feel that muscle push up back against me. Belly of the hamstring, like Joe on go, just lift it up a couple of inches. 1, 2, 3, go. Cool. That was a pretty easy one. You can actually see the timing difference between the two. Going to the middle, 1, 2, 3, go. Even better. Bottom, 1, 2, 3, go. Better. The pec major, pec minor, anterior delt become primary stabilizers for that joint. There's a couple of ways you tend to see this. They can happen independently, or you can get both at the same time. The easiest way to see it is normally going to be the overhead press. Find they run out of room here, and they can't get back to here. They can't get back to there because these muscles, the pec minor and the anterior delt, they have to let go too much to get them back there, and they need that to stabilize the humerus. The body's not willing to give it away. So there's a few ways that it'll get there. Most obvious one is that they don't get more range, they just change the entire angle of the torso so that that bar goes where it wants to, which is straight over the midfoot. So they'll start here and then hyperextend the spine. Now it's there. They won't extend the elbow, and if they don't extend the elbow, what you find a lot is that they'll internally rotate the humerus to get there. Big one for that bent elbow internal rotation is hip pull-ups. See, all the time they'll go forward, they won't have the range, bend the elbow, now they can get forward, right? So what we want to do is find a way to assess whether that scapula is stabilizing itself correctly so we can transfer power from the core through the shoulder into the extremities. What we're going to use is a one-arm wall push-up. There is, move that out of the way. Do you guys want to jump up and come around? You need to be fairly close to see.
Is that going to stay on there? Or is that going to bring it out? That'll stay on.
So it's, what the movement will basically be is they'll start here, come in, come back. And you'll have your finger sort of pushing into that inferior angle of the scapula and a little bit under it, if you can. In getting them to set them up like they're going to do a push up off the wall with both hands. Okay, get them to start at the bottom, so you know that they're not going to run into the wall when they get down there and smash their face. Then get them to push all the way out. What you're looking for is that their feet aren't too close to the wall and it tips them off balance. Another thing to watch out for when they're setting up, this is your first opportunity to have a look at what their default push mechanic is, right? What are they doing with their fingers? Where does the index finger point? Are the elbows tucked in? Are they out nice and high? Are the hands close to the shoulders, or are they spread out? Can we get you? So set yourself up on the wall. You're doing your push-up. Come in nice and close, just until you, Sit down into a neutral position for me. Cool. So what I'm looking at before we do anything else, splayed fingers. So spread your fingers apart for me. Good. Flat palms. Index finger needs to point straight at the roof. So just externally rotate a bit. Good. Want those elbows tucked in here, nice and close to the body, and the hands should be at or just a little bit down from the shoulders. Okay, we're not going all the way down, so it won't be quite as low as they would normally in a push-up. Then I want you to extend away from the wall, keeping that tight. Cool, so she's still leaning in a bit, make sure those elbows are locked out, and she's not going to tip herself backwards. Put your left arm down by the side of your body, and do a one-arm push-up in towards the wall. And come back. Cool, so just from here, relax, I'm looking at, does that spine remain neutral for the movement? Does it twist at all? As far as what I'm going to do with my fingers, I want to find that inferior angle of the scapula, which is right here. I'm going to push into it and try and get under it, just a little bit, so I can feel that compression. Do your push-up again, going in nice and slow. And come back. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want. I don't know if you could see what was happening with my fingers, but as she goes in, it retracts towards the spine, and you start to see my finger come further and further away as that scapula compresses towards the back of the rib cage. Be able to deliberately wing your scapula, and not, It's once you know how to do it right, it's quite hard to do it wrong. So do the same thing again. Yeah, it's hard to do it right. Sorry, hard to do it wrong. So that's what a good one looks like.
You grab nice and...
Yeah, do you want to have a go? Now for you, you also need to know what doing the test correctly feels like when you're testing it. All right, so we'll all go through it and make sure you know what it feels like. So just set yourself up. Set yourself up in the bottom position. Bring your hands in closer. Good. Splayed fingers, index fingers pointing to the roof, elbows nice and close to the body. Cool, so that's that inferior angle there. Slowly push, come back to your start position. That's it, and we're going to go one arm. So starting there, work your way into the wall. And come back. So did anyone see, did you see what was going on just by what was happening with my fingers?
It looked like it had a little bit of protraction.
I felt, so it retracted as it went in, but it didn't compress. It actually decompressed, and I could get my finger deeper onto that scapula. Cool. So again, what we tend to find, contraction here, pec minor, anterior delt, that's where the stabilization occurs. What we want is sort of, what do you call it? Axial stiffness. So torso, hips, shoulders are rock solid, and you have appendicular mobility. So I can move my arms, I can move my legs without compromising this. That allows me to move while still being able to express power. Combat sports, it's non-negotiable, essentially. Right, I want you to all come through, so I'll show you what a bad one feels like, and then I'll show you what a good one feels like. So do you want to start?
Yeah.
So just find that inferior angle of the scapula. That's it, and you want to be able to maintain pressure as we go in. Cool. So you feel how as we go in, it moves across, and it starts to flatten itself a little bit. I think it's just going to come over as well, show you.
So were you calling decompression
So this
as
is the
something separate to protraction?
yeah. So if this is the spine and this is the scapula, protraction's moving that way, and retraction is moving. What's it? Right.
So when it
Compression is
decompresses,
that way.
yeah,
Decompression is that way.
so it's not protraction.
As you push as you're pushing away,
Yeah.
you'll get decompression and protraction. So it'll come away from the spine and protract around at the same time. Come over, I'll show you. Right, so that's the inferior angle with there. There you go. That's it. So as I go in, don't push back, you want to be pushing that way. There you go. As I go in, retraction and compression. As I come back, it's going to go back the opposite way. Cool. All right. Cool. So you feel that? You feel it'll be small in some people, especially if it's real weak. Like they might get halfway in and then it just blows out and it just goes straight back to its start position. You know what it feels like. Done it before? I'll do it again. Since I find that inferior angle, pushing into it and a little bit under it. Cool. You feel that those two separate, they happen at the same time, but they're going in two different directions. Yep.
So you're doing little back.
I'll show you what a good one feels like. A bad one, it basically, if it doesn't go the way a good one should, then it's bad. Everything but this is bad.
Middle back.
Oh yeah. You feel like that doesn't really do, it basically just stays there. Yeah. Good one. Yeah. You feel how I said it beforehand? Yeah, that's ideally what it should just move in and compress a little bit. And as you go through that eccentric phase, it'll move in more and get back on the chest.
That makes sense.
Back in the rib cage more and more. Cool. So is everyone familiar with how we conduct the assessment? Is anyone not?
So both hands first and single.
Yeah, so set them up with both hands just because it's easier. You may get someone who's just too weak to do it that way. If that's the case, push up with one hand, just get them to put their fingers sort of like that on the wall so they can just stabilize themselves a little bit. Obviously that means there's going to be some issues here and here because they just can't control themselves, but it still gives you that opportunity to see whether that scapula is doing its job. Everyone knows what it feels like when it's right. Anything other than that is wrong. Okay, you may get one, which is just retraction and no compression. You may get compression and no retraction. You may get nothing. Cool. Break into your pairs, test at least one shoulder